Hey everyone, stop what you are doing right now, because what just happened in Illinois is one of the most infuriating stories in American manufacturing history, and the people who should be outraged the most are the ones nobody in the media is talking about. Here is the scene. One of the most iconic American companies in existence, a company whose green and yellow logo is recognized in every single state in this country, just posted its most profitable year in its entire history. $10.16 billion in profit, not revenue. Profit. Pure, clean, record-shattering profit. And 2 months later, that same company called 610 workers in Illinois and Iowa into meetings and told them their jobs were being moved to Mexico, not to another American state, not to a lower-cost part of the Midwest, Mexico. I am talking about John Deere, the 188-year-old company that has been manufacturing in Illinois since Abraham Lincoln was practicing law in Springfield. The company that is literally synonymous with American agriculture, American craftsmanship, and American industrial might. And I am talking about Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, the man presiding over an economic environment so hostile to manufacturing that the most profitable farm equipment company on earth decided it was cheaper to build in another country than to stay in his state. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what John Deere did, why they did it, and why the 610 workers who just lost their jobs to Mexico are not victims of corporate greed. They are victims of a political environment that made their jobs impossible to keep. Hit that subscribe button right now because this one goes extremely deep. Let us get into it. Let us start with John Deere because you need to understand the scale of what this company represents before you can appreciate how devastating this decision really is. John Deere was founded in 1837 by a blacksmith named John Deere who invented a self-scouring steel plow in Grand Detour, Illinois. Not in Texas, not in Florida, Illinois. The company has been headquartered in Moline, Illinois ever since, 188 years in the same state. It is the largest manufacturer of agricultural machinery in the world. When American farmers plant corn in Iowa, harvest soybeans in Indiana, or bale hay in Missouri, the odds are very high that the machine doing the work wears that green and yellow badge. John Deere is not just a company. It is part of the physical infrastructure of American food production. The company employs approximately 83,000 people worldwide. In Illinois and Iowa alone, it operates multiple major manufacturing facilities in Moline, East Moline, Davenport, Dubuque, and Waterloo. These are not white-collar tech jobs. These are skilled manufacturing positions. Welders, machinists, assembly line workers, quality control technicians, the kind of high-wage, middle-class industrial jobs that the Midwest was built on and that politicians across the spectrum claim to want to protect. And last year, John Deere posted $10.16 billion in net profit. Let that number sink in. $10 billion. That is more profit than Nike, Ford, and Delta Airlines combined. John Deere had one of the best financial years in its entire 188-year history. So why are 610 workers in Illinois and Iowa losing their jobs to Mexico right now? Here is where it gets real. And this is the part that the politicians in Springfield desperately do not want you to focus on. John Deere announced it is moving production of its skid steer loaders and compact track loaders, two of its most popular product lines, out of its Dubuque, Iowa, and Davenport, Illinois facilities and into manufacturing operations in Monterrey, Mexico. 610 workers directly affected. And this is not a sudden decision. John Deere has been quietly building this transition for years. Back in 2022, the company already moved its cab production to Mexico. This latest round of cuts is an acceleration of a strategy that has been in motion for the better part of a decade. Now here is the question that every worker in the Midwest should be demanding an answer to. How does a company that just made $10 billion in profit justify moving American jobs to Mexico? The answer is not what the politicians want you to hear. It is not about corporate greed. It is not about executives padding their bonuses. It is about the structural cost of operating a manufacturing facility in Illinois versus operating one in Mexico. And when you look at those numbers side by side, the decision becomes completely rational, which is exactly what makes it so devastating. Let us talk about what it actually costs to run a factory in Illinois. Illinois has one of the highest corporate income tax rates in the Midwest at 9.5%. The state's unemployment insurance tax rate for employers is among the highest in the nation. Workers' compensation insurance costs in Illinois are dramatically above the national average. In some manufacturing categories, Illinois employers pay 2 to 3 times what their counterparts pay in lower-cost states. And Cook County and the surrounding Illinois counties have some of the most aggressive commercial property tax regimes in the entire country. Now layer on top of that the union contract dynamics. John Deere's Illinois and Iowa workers are represented by the United Auto Workers. In 2021, those workers went on strike for 35 days, one of the longest John Deere strikes in company history, ultimately winning a contract that included significant wage increases, enhanced profit sharing, and improved benefits. These were legitimate wins for workers who had bargained hard, but every dollar of increased labor cost in Illinois is simultaneously a dollar that widens the gap between manufacturing in the American Midwest and manufacturing in Monterrey, Mexico. And here is the number that tells you everything you need to know about that gap. Average manufacturing wages in Monterrey, Mexico run approximately $4 to $6 per hour. Average manufacturing wages for a John Deere assembly worker in Illinois run approximately $30 to $35 per hour, including benefits. That is not a marginal difference. That is a structural chasm that no amount of operational efficiency can fully bridge. When you add Illinois' tax burden, regulatory costs, and workers' compensation rates on top of that labor differential, the math becomes overwhelming. This is what Governor J.B. Pritzker refuses to acknowledge publicly. Illinois has consistently ranked among the bottom 10 states in the country for business competitiveness. The Tax Foundation has placed Illinois in the bottom tier of its State Business Tax Climate Index for years. Companies that manufacture physical goods, companies that need large facilities, large workforces, and predictable long-term cost structures are particularly sensitive to this kind of chronic cost disadvantage. And John Deere is not alone. Illinois has been hemorrhaging manufacturing jobs for decades. Caterpillar moved its global headquarters from Deerfield, Illinois to Irving, Texas in 2022. Boeing relocated its headquarters from Chicago to Arlington, Virginia. Citadel moved from Chicago to Miami. The list of major corporations that have reduced their Illinois footprint or left entirely is staggering. And every time it happens, the political response from Springfield is the same. Expressions of concern, promises to work with labor unions, vague commitments to workforce development programs, and then the next company announces its next round of cuts. Here is the part of this story that should make every Illinois taxpayer genuinely furious. John Deere did not move these jobs to Mexico because it was struggling. It moved them while sitting on $10 billion in profit. And that distinction matters enormously, because it means this was not a survival decision. It was an optimization decision. The company ran the numbers and concluded that even with record profits, the structural cost of manufacturing in Illinois was high enough that it made more financial sense to invest in Mexican production capacity than to reinvest in American workers. Think about what that means. When a company is losing money and cuts jobs, you can argue it is a last resort. When a company that just made $10 billion cuts jobs, it is a statement about the fundamental competitiveness of your state as a place to make things. John Deere is not in crisis. John Deere just told Illinois that even in its best year ever, Illinois is not competitive enough to keep. Now let us talk about the 610 people whose jobs are going to Mexico, because this is not an abstraction. These are real families in Dubuque, Iowa, and Davenport, Illinois. Many of them have worked at John Deere for decades. Some of them followed their parents into those plants. They built their lives around the assumption that a job at John Deere in the American Midwest was one of the most stable, well-paying manufacturing positions available anywhere in the country. They were not wrong about that assumption. For generations, it was true. What changed is not John Deere, and it is not the workers. What changed is the operating environment that Illinois politicians have created and refused to fix for 30 years, while the companies their constituents depend on quietly ran the numbers and started planning their exits. The broader picture for Illinois is genuinely alarming. The state has lost population for 8 consecutive years. It is one of only a handful of states that has seen net population decline in each of those years. The people leaving are disproportionately working age, middle income earners, exactly the demographic that pays the taxes that fund Illinois' government. The state's pension liability is the worst in the nation on a per capita basis, creating a structural spending obligation that effectively locks in high tax rates for decades, regardless of what any governor promises. Springfield has tried to offset these structural problems with targeted incentives, tax credits for specific companies that agree to stay or expand in Illinois. But targeted incentives for politically connected companies are not a substitute for a fundamentally competitive operating environment. John Deere did not need a tax credit. John Deere needed Illinois to be a place where making things was economically rational, and Illinois failed that test. Here is the bottom line. 188 years. Through the Civil War, 2 World Wars, the Great Depression, the oil shocks of the 1970s, and the financial crisis of 2008, John Deere kept manufacturing in Illinois. And it took decades of accumulated cost disadvantages, regulatory burden, and an operating environment that even $10 billion in annual profit cannot make competitive to finally push the needle. 610 workers in Illinois and Iowa are losing their jobs not because John Deere failed. They are losing their jobs because their state failed them, failed to control its tax burden, failed to control its regulatory costs, failed to create the kind of competitive manufacturing environment that keeps American jobs in America instead of sending them to Monterrey. And Governor Pritzker will stand in front of cameras and talk about workforce transition programs and retraining initiatives. And the workers in Dubuque and Davenport will nod and wonder how a retraining program replaces $35 an hour with benefits at the most profitable farm equipment company on earth. I want to hear from you. Are you in Illinois or Iowa? Have you worked at John Deere or know someone who has? Do you think this is about corporate greed or failed state policy? Drop it in the comments because this conversation is the one that actually matters for the future of American manufacturing. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that are actually affecting working Americans and their futures. Hit the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming next. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop following the money. See you in the next one.